Welcome to Top 10 Secret. Do you believe in ghosts? Or are scary stories just a product of imagination? Today, we're diving into a world of mystery with top 10 terrifying and chilling ghost stories that will haunt your soul. Each tale is filled with eerie secrets, spine-tingling horrors, and events that will make your blood run cold. And the most chilling story of them all is the eternal reign of the Forsaken Queen. A terrifying legend of a cursed queen, an undying wrath, and lost souls forever trapped in her dark kingdom. Story 1. The Eternal Reign of the Forsaken Queen. Deep within the secluded forests of Blackwood lies a foreboding structure known as the Forsaken Castle. Cloaked in an aura of perpetual gloom, the castle is a place of endless dread and whispered legends. No villager dares approach, for the shadow of the immortal queen looms large. It is said that she presides over the souls of the lost, her hunger insatiable, her curse eternal. Long ago, the woman who would become the immortal queen was known as Lady Isolde Blackthorn. A noblewoman of unparalleled beauty, Isolde's vanity and ambition drove her to a dangerous obsession, the pursuit of eternal youth. On a fateful night under a new moon, she turned to the forbidden, summoning a demon to grant her immortality. In return, the demon demanded her humanity. Isolde accepted, her heart filled with greed. The ritual transformed her into a ghastly figure. Her once flawless skin cracked like dried earth, her eyes glowing hollow orbs of light, and black wings sprouting from her back. The demon's curse bound her to the castle, doomed to reign over the damned for eternity. For centuries, the legend of the Forsaken Queen grew. Travelers who ventured too close to the castle disappeared, their screams echoing in the night. Villagers reported sightings of a winged figure in the skies, her skeletal visage illuminated by the pale moonlight. The whispers carried warnings. The queen does not forgive, and her realm is a prison from which no soul escapes. In modern times, a group of thrill-seekers set their sights on the castle, hoping to unravel its mysteries and capture proof of the supernatural. Leading the group was Daniel Harper, a daring documentarian whose fame stemmed from exploring haunted locations. Accompanying him were Emma Clark, an expert in folklore, Michael Trent, a seasoned cameraman, and Sarah Evans, a sound engineer and skeptic who had built her career on debunking myths. The group arrived at Blackwood on a fog-drenched evening. The villagers were silent, their faces marked by fear. One elderly woman approached them, clutching a rosary in her trembling hands. "Turn back," she whispered. "The queen sees all. She will claim you." But Daniel dismissed the warnings, his resolve unshaken. Armed with cameras and recording equipment, the team ventured into the forest. The trees seemed to close in around them, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that blotted out the sky. The air grew colder as they neared the castle, the silence broken only by the crunch of leaves underfoot. The Forsaken Castle rose before them like a specter, its jagged towers piercing the mist. The team hesitated at its gates, their confidence faltering. The air was heavy, and the scent of decay lingered. "This place feels alive," Emma murmured, clutching her notebook tightly. Inside, the castle was a monument to forgotten grandeur. Dust-coated chandeliers hung from cracked ceilings, and faded tapestries adorned the walls, their depictions of battles and rituals obscured by time. As the team explored, they discovered symbols carved into the walls, strange runes that pulsed faintly, as though imbued with a sinister energy. Emma translated the inscriptions, warnings of an eternal queen who ruled over the souls of the cursed. In the great hall, they found her. Seated upon a throne of obsidian and bone was the immortal queen herself. Her hollow eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and her cracked lips twisted into a chilling smile. In her hands, she held a skull, stroking it as if it were a treasured possession. Her skeletal wings spread wide, casting dark shadows across the room. "Fools," she intoned, her voice a melody of despair. "You dare trespass in my domain." Michael raised his camera, his hands trembling. We just want to document the truth," he stammered. "The truth?" the Queen hissed, rising from her throne. "The truth is that your souls now belong to me." The air grew frigid, and the ground beneath them cracked, revealing fiery fissures. The Queen's wings unfurled fully, and with a single beat, a gust of icy wind extinguished their lights. Shadows coalesced around her, forming clawed hands that reached for the intruders. Michael was the first to fall, his screams silenced as the darkness consumed him. Daniel, Emma, and Sarah fled through the labyrinthine halls, their breath ragged. The castle seemed alive, its corridors twisting and shifting to trap them. Whispers filled the air, growing louder with every step. "She's coming," the voices warned, a chilling chorus that echoed in their minds. They reached a chapel adorned with faded symbols of protection. Emma frantically searched her notes, hoping to find a way to banish the Queen. "There's a ritual," she said, her voice shaking. "It requires a sacrifice." "No," Daniel said firmly. "We're not leaving anyone behind." But before they could act, the Queen appeared in the doorway, her wings folding around her like a shroud. "You cannot escape me," she said, her voice reverberating like thunder. "Your souls will fuel my reign." Emma stepped forward, clutching an ancient dagger she had found among the relics. "If it's a sacrifice you need," she said, tears streaming down her face, "then take me." The Queen tilted her head, her hollow eyes narrowing. "A noble offer," she said, "but futile." She lunged forward, her claws piercing Emma's chest. As Emma collapsed, the symbols in the chapel glowed brightly, forcing the Queen to retreat momentarily. But the reprieve was short-lived. Daniel and Sarah tried to escape, but the castle's doors slammed shut, trapping them. The Queen reappeared, her laughter filling the air. "There is no escape," she said. "You are mine." In their final moments, Daniel activated the camera, capturing the Queen's horrifying visage as she descended upon them. The footage ended abruptly, leaving only static. Weeks later, a search party found the camera at the edge of the forest. The footage revealed the team's descent into madness and their final confrontation with the immortal Queen. The last frame showed her staring directly into the lens, her hollow eyes glowing as she whispered, "I am eternal, and so is your fear." The Forsaken Castle remains untouched, a place of unspeakable horror. On nights when the wind howls through Blackwood, whispers of the Queen's laughter echo through the trees, a chilling reminder of her unending reign. Story 2. The Eternal Curse of Blood Moon Lovers. Deep within the cursed plains of Ravenshade, beneath the glow of a crimson moon, exists a tale older than time itself. It is the story of two immortal souls, Raphael Carter and Lillian Brooks, bound by love but cursed by darkness. Theirs is a romance forged in tragedy, doomed to endure pain and torment for eternity. Every blood moon they awaken, their skeletal forms locked in a chilling embrace, surrounded by chains that bind them to the world of the living and the dead. Centuries ago, Raphael was a celebrated knight, noble and strong, while Lillian was a healer, feared by some and revered by others for her knowledge of ancient magic. Their love blossomed in secret, for their union was forbidden. But when Raphael was mortally wounded in battle, Lillian turned to forbidden rituals in her desperation to save him. She invoked the power of the blood moon, a celestial phenomenon tied to dark and ancient forces. The ritual succeeded in saving Raphael's life, but it came at a price: their humanity. Raphael and Lillian were transformed into skeletal beings with cracked marble-like skin and hollow eyes that glowed with crimson fire. Black wings sprouted from their backs, and chains of darkness bound them together, symbols of their eternal torment. The blood moon, once their salvation, became the harbinger of their curse. Every time it rose in the night sky, they would awaken, trapped between love and despair, their souls unable to rest. The legend of Raphael and Lillian persisted through the ages, whispered among villagers who lived in fear of the cursed plains. It was said that those who ventured into the plains during the blood moon would encounter the lovers and become ensnared in their curse. Despite the warnings, a group of curious researchers decided to investigate the legend. Leading the group was Dr. James Monroe, a historian obsessed with uncovering the truth behind ancient myths. Accompanying him were Emily Foster, a linguist specializing in ancient scripts; Michael Reed, a videographer eager to document supernatural phenomena; and Sarah Hale, a skeptic who sought to debunk the legend. The group arrived in Ravenshade on the eve of the blood moon. The village was deserted, the air thick with unease. The only sign of life was an elderly man named Elias, who pleaded with them to leave. "The moon rises tonight," he warned. "The lovers will awaken, and their curse will claim you." Unfazed by the warnings, the group set out for the cursed plains as the crimson glow of the moon began to illuminate the landscape. The air grew colder with each step, and a strange metallic scent lingered. Emily paused to examine a patch of ground covered in red roses, their petals appearing to bleed. "This is it," she whispered. "The legend is real." At the center of the plain stood an ancient altar, surrounded by chains embedded in the earth. As the group approached, the ground began to tremble. A low hum filled the air, rising to a deafening roar as the blood moon reached its zenith. The chains around the altar snapped, and from the ground emerged Raphael and Lillian, their skeletal forms shimmering with an unholy glow. The lovers turned their hollow eyes toward the group. "Why do you disturb us?" Lillian's voice echoed, soft yet filled with pain. James stepped forward, his voice trembling. We want to understand your story." "Our story?" Raphael growled, his wings unfurling. "It is one of love and betrayal, of agony and despair, and now it will become yours." The chains that bound Raphael and Lillian extended like living entities, coiling toward the intruders. Michael tried to capture the scene on camera, but the lens cracked as a wave of darkness swept over him. He screamed as the chains wrapped around his body, pulling him toward the lovers. His form dissolved into mist, his soul absorbed by the glowing skull that Lillian held. The remaining three fled, their footsteps echoing across the desolate plains. The air grew heavy, and the landscape twisted around them, trapping them in an endless loop. Sarah, desperate to escape, turned to confront the lovers. "This is just a myth," she shouted. "You can't be real." Raphael appeared before her in an instant, his hollow eyes burning. "Do we look unreal to you?" he hissed, his skeletal hand gripping her throat. "Your disbelief will not save you." The chains coiled around Sarah, lifting her into the air. Her screams were drowned by the sound of her bones snapping. In moments, she was gone, her essence joining the cursed lovers. Emily and James stumbled into a ruined chapel at the edge of the plains. The walls were covered in ancient symbols that Emily recognized as protective wards. "This might be our only chance," she said, frantically translating the inscriptions. "It's a ritual to banish them, but it requires a sacrifice." James hesitated. "There has to be another way," he said. But before they could decide, The doors of the chapel burst open. Raphael and Lillian entered, their forms glowing with a menacing light. "You cannot escape us," Lillian said, her voice like a dirge. "The blood moon binds all who enter our domain." Emily stepped forward, holding the ritual dagger she had found on the altar. "If this is what it takes to end your torment, then so be it," she said, tears streaming down her face. "No!" James shouted, trying to stop her, but it was too late. Emily plunged the dagger into her heart, her blood spilling onto the chapel floor. The symbols on the walls glowed brightly, and a wave of light engulfed the lovers. For a moment, Raphael and Lillian's forms flickered. They looked at each other, their skeletal faces softening. "Is it over?" Raphael whispered, his voice trembling. But the light dimmed, and the blood moon's glow intensified. The lovers' chains reformed, binding them tighter than before. "Foolish girl," Lillian said, her voice filled with sorrow. "The curse cannot be broken. It only grows stronger." The chapel crumbled around them, and James was left alone, his mind fractured by the horrors he had witnessed. James was found wandering the outskirts of Ravenshade days later, muttering incoherently about the cursed lovers. The footage recovered from Michael's camera revealed the horrifying truth. The skeletal forms of Raphael and Lillian, their chains coiling around the group, and Emily's final desperate sacrifice. The last frame showed Raphael and Lillian locked in their eternal embrace, their hollow eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. In the background, the blood moon loomed large, casting its crimson glow over the desolate plains. To this day, no one dares to enter the cursed plains during the blood moon. Those who have tried claim to hear whispers in the wind and see shadowy figures dancing among the red roses. And when the blood moon rises, the cries of the lovers echo across the land, a chilling reminder that their torment and their curse will never end. Story 3. The Curse of the Stairs to Oblivion. Deep within the shadowy forests of Blackwood County lies an ancient staircase carved from obsidian black stone, known to the locals as the Stairs to Oblivion. No one remembers who built it or why, but legends claim it stretches infinitely upward, vanishing into an impenetrable fog. At its summit, it is said, a monstrous entity waits. A colossal skull formed from twisted roots and decayed wood, its hollow eyes a portal to eternal darkness. Those who ascend are never seen again, their screams swallowed by the wind. Centuries ago, the staircase was a site of worship for an enigmatic cult. They believed the skull was an ancient deity, a harbinger of creation and destruction. Ritual sacrifices, animal and human, were made to appease it. One fateful night during a blood moon, the entire cult vanished without a trace. All that remained were the stairs, cloaked in eerie silence and an unsettling aura of decay. Over the years, countless travelers, treasure seekers, and adventurers dared to climb the stairs, lured by promises of riches or forbidden knowledge. None returned. The villagers spoke of vengeful spirits and unholy whispers emanating from the site. Despite their warnings, the legend endured, whispered in hushed tones to ward off the curious and the foolish. In modern times, the legend of the Stairs to Oblivion caught the attention of a group of American researchers. Leading the team was Dr. Nathan Carter, a historian fascinated by ancient mysteries. Joining him were Evelyn Price, a linguist specializing in cryptic languages, Jake Harper, a videographer determined to document the supernatural, and Claire Emerson, a skeptic who believed the legend to be nothing more than a cautionary tale. The group arrived in Blackwood County on a cold, misty morning. The villagers refused to engage with them, their eyes filled with terror as they glanced toward the distant silhouette of the stairs. An elderly woman named Martha approached them, her hands trembling as she held a rosary. "Turn back," she whispered. "The stairs are cursed. No one who climbs them returns whole." Evelyn examined an ancient map marked with runes. "If the stories are true, this staircase predates recorded history," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "It could be one of the greatest discoveries of our time." Nathan nodded. "If it's real, we'll document it and put the myth to rest once and for all." As they reached the edge of the forest, a strange silence enveloped them. Even the birds seemed to avoid the area. The staircase loomed ahead, its dark surface glistening as though perpetually wet. Above it, the massive skull appeared to hover in the mist, its hollow eyes staring down with an unyielding gaze. The group began their climb, their footsteps echoing unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. As they ascended, the air grew colder, and faint whispers seemed to emanate from the stone beneath their feet. Jake paused to adjust his camera, its lens capturing fleeting shadows that moved independently of their light sources. "Do you hear that?" Evelyn asked, glancing over her shoulder. "It's just the wind," Claire replied, though her voice betrayed her unease. The whispers grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of unintelligible voices. Evelyn stopped to examine a carved symbol on the steps. "This is a warning," she murmured, her fingers tracing the etchings. "Turn back before your soul is claimed." Claire scoffed. "Classic scare tactic, let's keep going." As they climbed higher, the fog thickened, obscuring the forest below. The stairs stretched endlessly upward, and the skull above seemed closer, its grotesque details becoming more pronounced. Its empty sockets glowed faintly, pulsating with an unnatural light. Jake raised his camera toward the group. "Let's get some thoughts for the documentary. Nathan, what do you think?" Nathan hesitated. "It's unsettling. I've studied ruins all over the world, but this feels different. It feels alive." Before he could continue, a guttural growl echoed through the fog. The group froze. "What was that?" Claire whispered, her skepticism beginning to waver. "We're not alone," Evelyn said, clutching her notebook tightly. Figures began to materialize within the fog, humanoid shadows with glowing eyes. They circled the group, their whispers coalescing into agonized cries. Jake aimed his camera at one of the figures, but it vanished, leaving only a faint trail of smoke. "We need to go back," Evelyn pleaded. "We can't," Nathan said, glancing behind them. The steps they had climbed had disappeared, replaced by a gaping void. "The only way is up." The shadows grew bolder, their clawed hands reaching out from the mist. One latched onto Jake, dragging him toward the edge. He screamed, his camera falling from his grasp as he was pulled into the darkness. The remaining three pressed on, their breaths ragged and their nerves fraying. The whispers now spoke their names, taunting them with their deepest fears. Evelyn suddenly stopped, her eyes wide with terror. "They're showing me my father," she said, tears streaming down her face. "He's calling for me." "There's nothing there," Claire shouted, shaking her. But Evelyn broke free and ran into the fog. Her screams were brief, swallowed by the silence. Nathan and Claire continued their ascent, the skull above now glowing with an ominous intensity. "We never should have come here," Claire muttered. "This place is wrong." Nathan didn't respond. His focus was fixed on the stairs ahead, where a towering figure awaited. It was humanoid, but impossibly tall, its body composed of twisted roots and bones. Chains hung from its skeletal frame, each linked to spectral forms writhing in torment. "You have come far," the figure intoned, its voice resonating like a funeral dirge. "But your journey ends here." "What do you want?" Nathan demanded, his voice trembling. "Your soul," the gatekeeper replied, extending a bony hand. "It is the price for trespassing in my domain." Claire turned to flee, but the stairs beneath her crumbled, leaving her dangling over the abyss. The gatekeeper raised a hand, and chains coiled around her, dragging her into the void as she screamed. Nathan stood paralyzed, his mind unraveling. The gatekeeper pointed toward him. "You seek knowledge," it said. "Step forward and claim it." Against his better judgment, Nathan ascended the final step. The skull descended, its massive jaws opening to engulf him. For a fleeting moment, he saw visions of endless darkness, a sea of souls writhing in agony, and the gatekeeper standing above them, a cruel smile etched into its face. Days later, a group of villagers found Jake's shattered camera at the base of the stairs. The footage revealed fragments of the team's journey, the whispers, the shadows, and the moment the skull descended. The final frame showed Nathan staring into the camera, his hollow eyes filled with unspeakable terror. No one approaches the stairs to oblivion now, but on moonless nights, whispers can still be heard emanating from the site. Some claim to see ghostly silhouettes ascending the stairs, their forms fading into the mist. Above it all, the skull looms, its hollow eyes watching, waiting for the next soul to climb. Story 4. The Curse of the Hellfire Rider. In a cursed land where shadows and infernal flames reign, there exists a horrifying legend whispered only on moonless nights. The legend of the Hellfire Rider. He's a harbinger of destruction and wrath, a being not of this world. Every time he appears, everything in his path is consumed by fire, leaving behind ashes and eternal fear in the hearts of those who survive. The villagers tell of a once great warrior betrayed and slain in battle centuries ago. To exact revenge, his soul struck a pact with a demon, trading eternal servitude for immortality. But immortality was no blessing. It was a curse. His body was transformed into a flaming skeleton, forever astride a demonic horse. His soul was bound to hunt the lost and enact vengeance on traitors for eternity. Centuries ago, Ravok Blackthorn was a fierce and unmatched warrior. During a climactic battle, his comrades betrayed him, leaving him to die in a burning forest. As death closed in, Ravok swore vengeance against all who had wronged him. A shadowy entity heard his vow and offered a deal: unparalleled power and eternal life in exchange for his soul. Ravok accepted. Instantly, he was resurrected, but his body was reduced to a blazing skeleton cloaked in flames that would never extinguish. His horse, once his loyal companion, was transformed into a monstrous steed with a skeletal visage and fiery breath. Ravok became the Hellfire Rider, eternally bound to his unholy mission. In the small village of Ravenwood, the villagers began to notice ominous signs of the rider's return. At first, there were faint echoes of hoofbeats in the dead of night, though no one ever saw a horse. Then, livestock began to vanish, leaving behind only charred bones. As panic spread, entire fields ignited without warning, their flames burning unnaturally bright. The villagers, terrified, spoke of the rider in hushed voices and barred their doors at night. The elders warned everyone to avoid the forest and never utter his name aloud. But the fear and curiosity of a few would soon lead to disaster. In the heart of the village, 3 friends, Ethan, Olivia, and Mark, dismissed the tales as mere superstition. Ethan, bold and adventurous, was determined to uncover the truth. Olivia, a budding historian, was intrigued by the legend's origins. Mark, an ambitious photographer, wanted to capture evidence to disprove the myth. On a moonless night, the trio ventured into the cursed woods near the Blackstone Mountains, where the rider was said to roam. The air grew unnaturally cold, and the faint scent of sulfur wafted through the breeze. Olivia clutched an old book of legends, believing it might contain answers. "If we find the source of this curse, maybe we can stop it," she said. As they reached a clearing, The sound of distant hoofbeats thundered through the air, growing louder with each passing second. Suddenly, flames erupted from the ground, illuminating the dark forest. From the shadows emerged the Hellfire Rider, his skeletal figure ablaze and his horse snorting streams of fire. "You dare trespass on my domain?" His voice boomed, low and resonant, like the rumble of an earthquake. "Your souls will be the price." Ethan shouted back, "We're not afraid of you. You're just a story to scare children." The rider let out a chilling laugh, the sound echoing through the trees. "A story? Then let me show you reality." The rider drew a flaming sword from his side, swinging it in a wide arc that sent a wall of fire toward them. Olivia frantically flipped through her book, trying to find a way to stop him. But the roaring flames and the rider's piercing gaze paralyzed her. Mark raised his camera to take a shot, but all he captured was darkness as the lens cracked under the oppressive heat. The rider charged toward Mark, his horse's fiery hooves leaving scorched trails on the ground. With a single swing of his sword, the rider struck Mark, reducing him to ashes. Ethan and Olivia screamed in horror, but had no time to mourn. The rider turned his fiery gaze toward them, his skeletal grin widening as he advanced. Desperation drove Ethan and Olivia deeper into the forest, where they stumbled upon an ancient ruin marked with arcane symbols. Olivia recognized it from her book. It was the site where the rider's curse had been cast. "This place can seal him again," she cried. As the rider closed in, Olivia began reciting an incantation from the book. The symbols on the ruins began to glow faintly, and the flames around the rider flickered, as though being pulled toward the runes. He roared in anger, his voice shaking the ground. "You cannot bind me forever." The ritual demanded a sacrifice. Ethan realized what had to be done. "Finish the ritual," he told Olivia, determination in his eyes. "This is the only way." Before Olivia could stop him, Ethan stepped into the circle of runes and plunged a knife into his chest. His blood activated the final part of the spell, and a brilliant light erupted from the ruins. The rider let out a deafening scream as the flames around him were drawn into the glowing symbols. His horse reared, and both were pulled into the void, leaving behind a scorched crater. Olivia, exhausted and heartbroken, returned to the village with the story of their harrowing encounter. The Hellfire Rider had been sealed once more, but the villagers knew the truth. The curse was not broken, only delayed. On moonless nights, faint hoofbeats can still be heard echoing from the forest, and the air grows thick with the scent of sulfur. Some say the rider's voice can be heard in the wind, whispering promises of fiery vengeance. One day, he will rise again, and when he does, his wrath will be greater than ever before. A Story 5. The Curse of Azar Khan. The immortal mummy. In the heart of a vast and desolate desert, where shifting sands conceal secrets of a forgotten past, lies an ancient temple known as the Temple of Eternity. It is said to be the final resting place of Azar Khan, a king who defied the natural order and sought immortality through forbidden rituals. But instead of eternal life, he was cursed to exist as an undead abomination, trapped within the temple for all eternity. Those who dared to enter the temple never returned. Locals spoke of strange phenomena near the temple: flickering lights in the darkness, winds that carried the sound of wailing, and glowing red eyes visible during violent sandstorms. These tales were not mere folklore but dire warnings. Centuries ago, Azar Khan ruled over a prosperous kingdom. His wisdom and strength were legendary, but his insatiable hunger for power and fear of death consumed him. As he grew older, Azar Khan turned to his priests and sorcerers to find a way to cheat death. they uncovered a forbidden ritual that promised immortality, but required a heavy price. Blood sacrifices of hundreds of lives and the offering of their souls were needed to complete the rite. On a moonless night, the ritual was carried out. Azar Khan drank a potion of blood and chanted ancient incantations. As the ritual concluded, he felt a surge of power coursing through him. But the gods had seen his arrogance and punished him. His body twisted into a grotesque form, a decayed corpse wrapped in cursed bandages, his eyes glowing with eternal flames. Though immortal, he became a prisoner of his temple, bound to its darkness and solitude. Centuries passed, and Azar Khan's story faded into myth, but the temple remained buried beneath layers of sand. In modern times, its existence intrigued archaeologists and treasure hunters alike. One such group, led by Dr. Nathaniel Carter, ventured into the desert to uncover its secrets. Carter, a renowned American archaeologist, was accompanied by linguist Sarah Brooks, videographer Ethan Hayes, and historian Olivia Hart. They believed the temple held untold riches and invaluable knowledge. Despite warnings from locals about the curse, the group persisted. After days of searching, they found the temple's entrance partially buried under sand dunes. The air was unnaturally cold as they opened the stone doors, revealing a passage leading into darkness. The walls were lined with carvings depicting Azar Khan's reign, his descent into madness, and the horrific ritual that cursed him. Sarah translated the inscriptions as they moved deeper into the temple. "Those who disturb the king's eternal rest will awaken his wrath," she read aloud. Ethan laughed nervously. "Classic spooky warning. Let's keep moving." The group reached a grand chamber where a massive sarcophagus lay encased in chains. The air felt heavy, and a faint whisper seemed to emanate from the walls. Nathan couldn't resist the allure of what might lie within. Ignoring Sarah's protests, he began cutting through the chains. The moment the final chain fell, the temple trembled. The sarcophagus lid slid open, and a wave of freezing air extinguished their lanterns. From the darkness, Azar Khan emerged. His body was wrapped in tattered bandages, his skeletal hands glowing with unholy energy, and his fiery eyes burned with hatred. His voice, deep and resonant, filled the chamber. "Who dares disturb my slumber?" Ethan raised his camera, but it malfunctioned as soon as it captured Azar Khan's form. The mummy extended a hand, and spectral tendrils shot out, ensnaring Ethan. He screamed as the tendrils pulled him toward Azar Khan, who consumed his soul, leaving behind only ash. Nathan, Sarah, and Olivia fled down the dark corridors, but the temple seemed alive, shifting and changing to trap them. They stumbled into a room filled with ancient glyphs. Sarah realized it was a ritual chamber. "This is where he was cursed," she said, scanning the symbols. "There must be a way to seal him again." Azar Khan's booming footsteps echoed closer. "There's no time," Nathan shouted. Sarah frantically deciphered the glyphs while Olivia held a lantern to light the symbols. The inscriptions demanded a sacrifice to rebind Azar Khan. "I'll do it," Nathan said, his voice steady. "I'm the one who unleashed him." Before Sarah or Olivia could stop him, Nathan stepped into the center of the ritual circle and slashed his palm, letting his blood drip onto the glyphs. As he recited the incantations Sarah had translated, Azar Khan appeared at the entrance, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you can bind me again?" Azar Khan roared. "Your souls will feed my wrath." The glyphs began to glow, and a vortex of light and shadows enveloped Azar Khan. He let out an unearthly scream as the ritual pulled him back toward his sarcophagus. Before being sealed, he pointed at Sarah and Olivia. "I will return, and when I do, your world will burn." The chamber collapsed as the ritual completed. Sarah and Olivia barely escaped the temple, which was swallowed by the shifting sands. They returned to civilization with Nathan's journal and Ethan's damaged camera. Their story was met with skepticism, but the terror in their eyes was undeniable. Years later, during a violent sandstorm, locals reported seeing glowing red eyes in the desert and hearing a deep, guttural laugh carried on the wind. The legend of Azar Khan lived on, a chilling reminder that some curses can never truly be broken. Story 6. The Wrath of Selena. The goddess of dark flames. Deep within the dense forests of Oregon, buried under centuries of overgrowth, lay the infernal shrine, a temple of sinister legend. It was said to be the prison of Selena, the goddess of dark flames. Once a mortal priestess of the light, Selena had fallen into the grip of forbidden power, transforming into a being of unimaginable destruction. Her wrath was sealed away by ancient rituals, but the warnings persisted. Disturbing her rest would reignite a cataclysmic vengeance. Selena's story began in an age long forgotten. Revered as a guardian of the sacred flame, she was chosen to lead her people as a bridge between the divine and mortal realms. Her beauty and wisdom inspired devotion, but within her burned a deep-seated fear. Fear of death, of irrelevance, of being forgotten. This fear became an obsession. When the gods denied her prayers for eternal life, she turned to darker forces. Her ritual of ascension demanded the sacrifice of hundreds of innocent souls, merging their life force with the flames of the underworld. In her moment of triumph, the gods intervened, cursing her to an eternity of torment. Her body became a vessel of living fire, her humanity stripped away. Her temple became her prison, and over time, the infernal shrine was buried by nature. The world moved on, the legend fading to myth. But whispers of Selena's existence endured in local folklore. On nights of the blood moon, hunters claimed to see fiery apparitions, hear echoes of haunting laughter, and feel an unnatural heat emanating from the forest depths. In the present day, Dr. Nathan Grayson, an ambitious archaeologist from Seattle, became enthralled by the legend of Selena. After years of chasing whispers and examining obscure texts, Nathan pinpointed the likely location of the infernal shrine. Determined to uncover the truth, he assembled a team. Sarah Brooks, a linguist specializing in ancient languages. Ethan Clark, a videographer eager for the next big supernatural story. And Olivia Morgan, a historian focused on mythological studies. Their journey into the forest was met with skepticism from locals. The elderly in town warned them to stay away, speaking of curses and disappearances. But Nathan dismissed their fears, convinced that the temple held historical significance, not supernatural danger. The team hiked for days before finally uncovering the temple's entrance, concealed beneath a thicket of vines and moss. As they cleared the path, a sense of unease settled over them. But curiosity drove them forward. The interior of the shrine was suffocatingly dark, the air heavy with the scent of sulfur. Faint carvings on the walls depicted Selena's transformation, the rituals of her followers, and the wrath of the gods. Sarah translated inscriptions aloud, her voice echoing ominously. "She who sought eternity shall burn forever. Disturb her rest, and the flames will consume all." Nathan was enthralled. Do you understand what this means? We've found it, the source of the legend. This will rewrite history. He led the team deeper into the shrine, eventually arriving at its heart. Before them stood a massive obsidian altar, its surface glowing faintly red. At the center was a gemstone, pulsating like a beating heart. Olivia hesitated, sensing the danger. "Nathan, this isn't just an artifact. It's alive." Ignoring her, Nathan reached for the gemstone. The moment he touched it, the air grew scalding and the walls trembled. A low, guttural roar filled the chamber as the gemstone shattered, releasing a torrent of flames. From the inferno emerged Selena, her form both mesmerizing and horrifying. Her skin was a mosaic of obsidian and flame, her eyes molten orbs that radiated fury. Her voice, a blend of beauty and malice, reverberated through the temple. "Who dares awaken me?" Ethan attempted to film the apparition, but his camera overheated and failed. Selena's gaze locked onto him. "You seek to capture my image? Let me show you true eternity." With a flick of her hand, flames engulfed Ethan, leaving nothing but ash. Sarah screamed, and Nathan pulled her back as Selena advanced, her steps igniting the stone beneath her feet. The team fled, the temple's corridors twisting and shifting as if alive. Selena's laughter echoed around them, a chilling reminder that escape was futile. They stumbled into a chamber filled with ancient runes etched into the walls and floor. Sarah recognized the symbols. This is a sealing ritual. It's how they trapped her before. Olivia knelt beside her, deciphering the glyphs. It requires a sacrifice. A life must be given to fuel the spell. Selena appeared in the doorway, her flames flaring with fury. "You cannot bind me again. Your world will burn, and I will rise as its queen." Nathan stepped forward, his face resolute. "If someone has to do it, it'll be me." Before Sarah or Olivia could protest, he cut his palm and pressed it to the central glyph. As his blood soaked into the markings, the runes began to glow, and a vortex of light and fire engulfed Selena. She screamed in rage, her form writhing as the sealing spell took hold. "You think this will save you?" she snarled, her voice a mixture of pain and defiance. "I will return, and when I do, you will beg for mercy." With a final burst of flames, she was pulled back into the altar, and the chamber fell silent. The temple began to collapse as the sealing ritual completed. Sarah and Olivia barely escaped, their hearts heavy with the loss of Nathan and Ethan. The shrine sank into the earth, its entrance buried once more. The two survivors returned to civilization, haunted by what they had witnessed. Their account was met with disbelief, but the terror in their eyes was undeniable. Years later, during a blood moon, reports emerged of strange fires in the forest, and a figure wreathed in flames seen wandering among the trees. Selena's laughter echoed once more, a chilling reminder that her curse was not broken, only delayed. Her wrath would return, and when it did, the world would face a firestorm unlike any it had ever known. Story 7. The Curse of the Death Hand. The waters of Hollow Tide, nestled along the rugged Pacific Northwest coastline, had always been a place of foreboding. Generations of local fishermen spoke in hushed tones about the cursed sea, where waves crashed against the jagged rocks with unnatural fury, and a sense of despair clung to the air. At the heart of these tales was the Death Hand, a monstrous skeletal hand said to rise from the depths, its fingers clawing at the heavens as it dragged unsuspecting souls into the abyss. The legend dated back millennia, to a forgotten kingdom that had once thrived along this very shore. Ruled by King Aldrin, a man known for his insatiable greed and ruthless ambition, the kingdom was said to possess wealth beyond measure. But Aldrin, consumed by a fear of losing his power, sought the counsel of forbidden forces. He made a pact with an ancient entity that dwelled in the ocean depths, offering countless human sacrifices in exchange for eternal dominion. The entity, a primordial being known only as the Abyssal One, granted his wish, but at a cost Aldrin did not foresee. One fateful night, the sea rose with violent intent, and a colossal skeletal hand emerged, dragging Aldrin, his palace, and the entire kingdom beneath the waves. Only the hand remained, a grim monument to Aldrin's folly, reaching endlessly toward the sky. In modern times, Hollow Tide had become a curiosity for thrill seekers and treasure hunters. but none had ever returned with proof of the Death Hand or Aldrin's kingdom. Dr. Nathaniel Grayson, a renowned American archaeologist with a reputation for chasing myths, became obsessed with the story. He believed the legend held the key to one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history. Accompanied by his team, Sarah Carter, a linguist specializing in ancient texts, Ethan Blake, a videographer documenting their journey, and Olivia Marks, a historian with a penchant for uncovering forgotten truths. Nathan set out to uncover the truth behind the legend. The group arrived at the small coastal town of Greyhaven under a shroud of mist. The locals were unwelcoming, their faces etched with unease as they avoided answering questions about the Death Hand. Only Elias, an elderly fisherman with eyes clouded by age and fear, offered any insight. "The sea doesn't forgive," he warned, his voice trembling. "The hand hungers for souls. Turn back before it's too late." Undeterred, Nathan hired a small fishing boat to take them as close as possible to the rumored site of the Death Hand. The morning of their departure was eerily calm, but as they neared the waters of Hollow Tide, the atmosphere shifted. The sea grew unnaturally still, and the air carried a foul stench of decay. The horizon darkened as if a storm was brewing, though no clouds gathered in the sky. As the boat approached a jagged rock formation protruding from the waves, Sarah noticed strange carvings on the rocks. The symbols were ancient, a language she had only encountered in fragmented texts. "It's a warning," she said, her voice tight with apprehension. "It says, 'The cursed rise to claim the living. The hand takes what cannot be returned.'" Nathan dismissed her concerns, his eyes alight with excitement. "This is exactly what we're looking for. It proves the legend is real." Suddenly, the water around them began to churn violently. Waves slammed against the boat with unnatural force. From the depths, a shadow emerged, growing larger and darker until it broke the surface. The Death Hand rose, its skeletal form dripping with seaweed and the remnants of the damned. The fingers curled and uncurled as if testing the air, and a low, guttural hum reverberated through the water. Ethan, struggling to steady his camera, managed to capture a brief shot before the lens cracked under the oppressive atmosphere. "It's alive," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the crashing waves. The hand moved with horrifying speed, slamming into the boat and shattering part of the hull. Water poured in as the group scrambled to keep their footing. Before they could react, one of the hand's massive fingers curled around Ethan, lifting him into the air. His screams were cut short as the hand crushed him with a sickening crunch, his lifeless body falling into the sea. Sarah screamed as Nathan pulled her away from the edge. Olivia frantically attempted to deploy a life raft, but the sea seemed intent on dragging them closer to the Death Hand. "It's hunting us!" Olivia shouted, her voice laced with panic. In desperation, Nathan directed the group toward a partially submerged ruin visible in the distance. "There," he yelled. "We'll find shelter inside." They abandoned the sinking boat, swimming through the frigid waters toward the structure. As they neared, the outline of a grand temple became clear. The entrance was framed by intricate carvings depicting Aldrin's kingdom, the sacrificial rituals, and the rise of the Death Hand. Inside, the air was thick and suffocating, and the faint sound of whispers echoed through the chambers. At the heart of the temple stood a massive stone altar. The walls were inscribed with runes that glowed faintly in the dim light. Sarah began translating the text, her hands trembling. It says, "The only way to appease the Abyssal One is through a willing sacrifice." Olivia's face went pale. "You're not serious. There has to be another way." Before they could decide, the Death Hand began to claw its way into the temple, its skeletal fingers tearing through the walls. The ground shook violently, and debris rained down around them. Nathan turned to Sarah and Olivia, his expression grim. "It's me. I'll do it." "No," Sarah protested, tears streaming down her face. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Nathan said firmly. I'm the one who led us here. It's my responsibility." Before anyone could stop him, Nathan climbed onto the altar and sliced his palm, letting his blood drip onto the runes. The symbols flared to life, and the temple filled with an otherworldly glow. The Death Hand let out an ear-splitting roar as the light engulfed it, pulling it back toward the ocean depths. Nathan looked at Sarah one last time, a faint smile on his face. "Get out of here. Tell the world what happened." The hand grabbed Nathan, dragging him into the abyss as the temple began to collapse. Sarah and Olivia barely escaped, swimming to the surface as the ruins sank into the sea. They reached the shore, gasping for breath and overwhelmed by the horrors they had witnessed. Years later, Sarah returned to Greyhaven, haunted by nightmares of the Death Hand. Locals claimed to see its shadow rising from the waves during storms, and the air carried whispers of those it had claimed. The sea at Hollow Tide remained cursed, an eternal reminder that some legends are better left undisturbed. Story 8. The Gatekeeper of Time. In the isolated town of Hollow Falls, nestled among the dense forests of Oregon, stood an ancient and abandoned monument known as the Clock Tower of Eternity. For generations, the tower loomed over the town like a harbinger of dread, its clock face shattered and its hands eternally frozen at 11:59. Few dared approach it, and even fewer spoke of it. Whispers among the townsfolk told of an entity that lived within, the Gatekeeper of Time, a being said to guard the fragile balance of existence, punishing those who sought to tamper with it. The origins of the Gatekeeper were shrouded in mystery, but legends claimed it was summoned centuries ago by a group of rogue scholars who sought to bend time to their will. Obsessed with achieving immortality, they performed forbidden rituals atop the clock tower. Their experiments tore through the fabric of reality, and from the rift emerged the Gatekeeper, a skeletal, ethereal entity cloaked in shadows and starlight. Its hollow eyes glowed with the light of dying stars, and its presence brought madness to those who dared to look directly at it. The scholars were consumed, their souls forever bound to the mechanisms of the tower. From that day on, the Clock Tower of Eternity became a cursed place, a nexus between time and oblivion. In the present day, the legend of the Gatekeeper caught the attention of Dr. Nathaniel Hayes, a physicist specializing in temporal anomalies. Nathan was determined to uncover the truth behind the clock tower, believing it could hold answers to the mysteries of time itself. Accompanying him were Amelia Carter, a historian with a deep knowledge of occult lore, Ethan Brooks, a videographer eager to document the supernatural, and Claire Monroe, a skeptical investigator who sought to debunk myths. The group arrived in Hollow Falls on a cold autumn evening, the town shrouded in a perpetual fog. The locals were wary of the outsiders, their gazes filled with silent warnings. At a dimly lit diner, an elderly man named Elias approached the team. His voice was low, his words weighted with fear. "You don't belong here," he said. "The tower isn't just cursed, it's alive, and it doesn't forgive." Nathan dismissed the warnings, his curiosity overriding his caution. "Every legend has a basis in reality," he said confidently. "We're here to find the truth." The following night, the team made their way to the Clock Tower of Eternity. The air grew colder as they approached, and the sound of their footsteps seemed to be swallowed by the oppressive silence. The tower's iron doors groaned as they pushed them open, revealing a cavernous interior filled with rusted gears, tangled chains, and faded inscriptions etched into the walls. Amelia's eyes widened as she studied the markings. "These symbols are ancient," she said. "They tell the story of the Gatekeeper. It was summoned to restore balance when humanity disrupted the flow of time. But it doesn't serve. It judges. Ethan set up his camera, capturing the eerie atmosphere. "This place feels wrong," he muttered. "Like it's watching us." Nathan's attention was drawn to the heart of the tower, where a massive, partially functioning clock mechanism stood. At its center was a pedestal holding an obsidian hourglass. The sand inside shimmered like liquid silver, defying gravity as it flowed upward. "This must be the source of the legend," Nathan said, approaching the artifact. "If we can study it, we might uncover how time works." Amelia hesitated. "Nathan, don't..." But it was too late. The moment Nathan touched the hourglass, the entire tower shuddered. The clock's frozen hands began to move, ticking forward with an unnatural resonance. A deep, guttural laugh echoed through the chamber, and the air grew thick with an oppressive energy. From the shadows, the gatekeeper materialized. It was taller than any human, its skeletal frame cloaked in a swirling void of stars and shadows. Its hollow eyes burned with an unearthly light, and its voice was a cacophony of whispers and thunder. "You have disturbed the flow of time," it intoned, each word reverberating through the room. "Now you will pay the price." Ethan raised his camera, but the lens cracked under the sheer weight of the gatekeeper's presence. "No mortal eyes may capture eternity," it said, raising a bony hand. Ethan was lifted into the air, his body contorting as if pulled apart by invisible forces. With a final scream, he disintegrated into a cloud of glowing particles, absorbed into the gatekeeper's form. Amelia screamed, grabbing Nathan's arm. "We need to leave, now!" But the tower's entrance had vanished, replaced by a swirling wall of mist. The gatekeeper advanced, its skeletal fingers reaching toward them. "You sought to control what cannot be controlled," it said. "Your arrogance shall be your undoing." Amelia frantically flipped through her notes, searching for any reference to a way to stop the gatekeeper. "There's a ritual," she said, her voice shaking. "A way to bind it again. But it requires a sacrifice." Nathan nodded grimly. "If that's what it takes, we have to do it." Claire, who had remained silent until now, protested. "You're not seriously considering this, are you? There has to be another way." Before they could decide, the gatekeeper struck. Its massive hand swept through the room, sending gears and debris flying. Amelia and Claire managed to avoid the attack, but Nathan was caught. He clutched the hourglass tightly as the gatekeeper loomed over him. "Do it!" Nathan shouted to Amelia. "Finish the ritual!" Amelia and Claire scrambled to arrange the symbols etched into the floor, aligning them into a specific pattern. As Amelia chanted the incantation, the runes began to glow, and the room filled with an otherworldly light. The gatekeeper roared, its form distorting as it was drawn toward the circle. "You cannot bind me forever," it snarled. "Time is infinite. I will return, and when I do, your world will burn." With a deafening scream, the gatekeeper was pulled into the hourglass. The light faded, and the tower fell silent. Nathan was gone, his sacrifice sealing the gatekeeper once more. Amelia and Claire emerged from the tower at dawn, their bodies bruised and their minds scarred. The clock had stopped again, its hands frozen at 12 o'clock. The townsfolk noticed a change in the air, lighter, less oppressive. But the two women knew the truth. The gatekeeper was not destroyed, only imprisoned. Its whispers could still be heard on quiet nights, carried on the wind like a grim reminder of the price of hubris. Amelia returned to her studies, dedicating her life to ensuring the gatekeeper remained sealed. But Claire, unable to cope with the trauma, disappeared shortly after their return, leaving behind a single note. "It's still watching." The clock tower of eternity stands as it always has, an ominous reminder of mankind's arrogance. Locals claim that on certain nights, the clock hands move ever so slightly, and the air grows cold with the weight of unseen eyes. Those brave, or foolish, enough to approach swear they hear the ticking of a clock, louder than it should be, and the faint laughter of the gatekeeper echoing from the void. Story 9. The Curse of Seraphina. The Fallen Angel. Deep within the Carpathian Mountains lies a forsaken wasteland shrouded in eternal twilight. A realm known to the few who dare to speak its name as the Ashen Vale. This desolate expanse, where the air is heavy with ash and the ground cracks beneath every step, is said to be the prison of a fallen angel, Seraphina. Once a guardian of divine light, she now kneels in torment, her enormous black wings smoldering with embers, a grim reminder of her eternal punishment. The story of Seraphina is one of hubris, betrayal, and ceaseless agony. In an age when the universe was young, Seraphina was a celestial protector, her wings a radiant white, her voice a melody of hope and healing. But her thirst for knowledge became her downfall. She sought to uncover the mysteries of existence, venturing into forbidden realms in search of the balance between light and darkness. In her quest, she inadvertently unleashed an ancient shadow, a force of chaos and destruction that threatened the celestial order. Her kin turned against her, banishing her to the Ashen Vale to live out eternity as a guardian of the very darkness she had unleashed. The veil became her prison, a barren wasteland where no light could penetrate. Her radiant wings were scorched black, their once brilliant feathers now glowing faintly with embers. The shadow she had released lingered in the veil, a formless entity that whispered promises of freedom and vengeance. For centuries, Seraphina remained, her sorrow and rage growing with each passing moment. In the modern world, the legend of Seraphina had faded into obscurity, surviving only in fragmented myths and forgotten texts. It wasn't until the discovery of an ancient manuscript, the Codex of the Forsaken, that whispers of her name resurfaced. The Codex, found in the ruins of a monastery deep in Eastern Europe, detailed the existence of the Ashen Vale and the angel condemned to guard it. The discovery captured the imagination of Dr. Nathaniel Grayson, an ambitious theologian and historian from Boston. Nathaniel had spent years chasing myths, seeking the intersection between religion and the supernatural. When he came across the Codex, he became obsessed with uncovering the truth about Seraphina and her prison. Joining Nathaniel were Claire Bennett, a linguist specializing in ancient languages; Ethan Ford, a documentary filmmaker eager to capture the expedition; and Olivia Carter, a skeptic determined to debunk the legend. Together, they ventured to the Carpathian Mountains, following the Codex's cryptic map to the alleged location of the Ashen Vale. The team arrived in the mountains under the cover of twilight, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. As they climbed higher, the landscape grew increasingly desolate. The trees became gnarled and barren, their twisted branches reaching skyward like skeletal fingers. The sun faded behind a veil of ash, leaving them in an eerie, perpetual dusk. At the base of a crumbling stone archway, they found the entrance to the Ashen Vale. The air shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and the ground beyond the archway was a barren expanse of cracked stone and swirling ash. The team hesitated, but Nathaniel pressed forward, his excitement overriding his fear. As they stepped into the veil, the temperature plummeted, and an oppressive silence enveloped them. In the distance, they saw her, Seraphina, kneeling amidst the ash, her wings partially unfurled. The faint glow of embers illuminated her form, casting flickering shadows that danced like wraiths in the darkness. "Is that her?" Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible. "It can't be real." Nathaniel nodded, his breath visible in the frigid air. "It's her. It has to be." Seraphina lifted her head as they approached, her glowing amber eyes locking onto them. Her voice, a haunting melody tinged with despair, filled the air. "You should not have come here, mortals. This is a place of endings." Nathaniel stepped forward cautiously. "We mean you no harm. We're here to understand, to learn your story." "My story?" Seraphina's laugh was bitter, like the crackling of dying flames. "You seek to unravel truths you cannot comprehend. What could you hope to gain from my suffering?" Ethan, his camera rolling, asked, "What are you guarding? Why are you here?" Seraphina's gaze darkened. "I guard what should never be freed, the shadow that lingers here, born of my hubris, my sin. If it escapes, your world will burn." As she spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. A low, guttural growl echoed through the veil, and the air grew thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. Despite Seraphina's warnings, Nathaniel was determined to uncover the truth. He revealed a ritual from the Codex that he believed could free her from her curse. "If we release you," he said, "you can return to the light. You don't have to stay here." Seraphina's eyes widened in alarm. "You do not understand what you are tampering with. The seal is not just my prison, it is the chain that binds the shadow. If you break it, you will doom us all." But Nathaniel, blinded by his ambition, began the incantation. As he spoke the ancient words, the ground split open, and a dark, amorphous mass began to rise. The shadow took form, its formless tendrils reaching out with malevolent intent. "No!" Seraphina cried, her wings flaring as she launched herself toward the shadow. "You fools, you've unleashed it!" The shadow lashed out, engulfing Ethan in an instant. His screams echoed briefly before fading into silence. Claire and Olivia tried to flee, but the veil's shifting terrain trapped them. One by one, they were consumed, their forms vanishing into the darkness. As the shadow grew, Seraphina stood against it, her wings blazing with renewed intensity. She turned to Nathaniel, her voice resolute. "You've damned yourself, but I will not let this world fall." With a surge of power, she drove herself into the heart of the shadow, her light clashing with its darkness in a violent explosion. The veil shook, and the air was filled with blinding light and deafening noise. When the dust settled, the shadow was gone, and Seraphina knelt once more, her wings reduced to smoldering stumps. Nathaniel, the sole survivor, collapsed to his knees, his mind shattered by what he had witnessed. He stumbled out of the ashen veil, the archway crumbling behind him, sealing the realm forever. Nathaniel returned to Boston a broken man, haunted by visions of Seraphina and the shadow. He tried to warn the world, but his words were dismissed as the ramblings of a madman. The Codex, now blank, became a relic of his failure. In the ashen veil, Seraphina remains, her body weakened but her resolve unbroken. The shadow is gone, but its whispers linger, promising vengeance. On certain nights, travelers in the Carpathian Mountains claim to see a faint glow in the distance and hear the mournful song of the fallen angel, a reminder of the price of hubris and the eternal weight of guilt. Story 10. The Watcher's Eye. In the forgotten corners of upstate New York, hidden beyond dense forests and treacherous hills, lay the cursed village of Ashenmore. It had been abandoned for generations, its ruins shrouded in perpetual mist and dread. Locals whispered tales of an ancient entity, a monstrous, unblinking eye that watched over the land, judging all who dared approach. They called it the Watcher, a being neither of this world nor the next, bound to the crucifix at the heart of the village. The Watcher's curse had reduced Ashenmore to ash and shadows. Those who ventured near the village claimed to hear whispers in the wind, feel unseen eyes upon their backs, and see glimpses of shadows moving in the periphery. The most persistent stories spoke of an enormous, ethereal eye hovering in the sky above Ashenmoor, glowing with malevolent intelligence. For decades, it was a place of fear, until it drew the attention of an ambitious group of researchers. Dr. Eleanor Vance was a historian and folklorist renowned for her obsession with the supernatural. She had spent years chasing legends, convinced that ancient myths held truths lost to time. Her latest project, fueled by whispers of Ashenmoor's curse, brought her to the village. She believed that uncovering the truth behind the Watcher would cement her legacy as a pioneer in uncovering humanity's hidden history. Accompanying Eleanor were her closest colleagues: Victor Harlan, a former priest-turned-occult researcher; Emma Lowe, a journalist seeking the story that would make her career; and Darrell Reeves, a skeptical scientist who believed he could disprove the supernatural once and for all. Each had their reasons for joining, though none fully understood the peril that awaited them. The journey to Ashenmoor was arduous. They followed crumbling maps and faint trails, pushing deeper into the wilderness. As they drew closer, the air grew colder, and an unnatural silence settled around them. The forest, once alive with birdsong and rustling leaves, seemed to hold its breath. When they finally emerged from the trees, the village lay before them, a desolate expanse of crumbled stone and charred earth. At its center stood a towering crucifix, its wood blackened with age and fire. Above it, the Watcher's eye dominated the storm-filled sky. Its iris swirled with hues of crimson and gold, and its unblinking gaze seemed to pierce straight into their souls. As they entered the village, the weight of the Watcher's presence grew unbearable. The air was thick with an oppressive force, and faint whispers echoed around them. Eleanor, undeterred, approached the crucifix at the center of the village. She pulled out a notebook filled with notes and translations from ancient texts, comparing the symbols carved into the crucifix to those she had studied. Victor stood close to her, clutching a worn crucifix of his own. "This place is cursed," he murmured. "We should leave before it's too late." But Eleanor was resolute. This is the culmination of years of research. If the legends are true, this site is a gateway, a place where the boundaries between our world and another are thinnest. Emma raised her camera, capturing the eerie landscape. "People need to see this," she said, though her voice trembled. "They need to know what's out here." Darrell scoffed, though unease flickered across his face. "It's just atmospheric phenomena. The human brain is wired to find patterns where there are none." But even Darrell couldn't deny the whispers that grew louder as they neared the crucifix. The voices spoke in a language none of them understood, yet each felt as though the words were meant for them. Eleanor knelt by the base of the crucifix, tracing the symbols etched into the stone. "This is a summoning ritual," she said. "The villagers must have called upon something they couldn't control." As Eleanor spoke, the ground beneath them trembled. The whispers turned to screams, and the air grew heavy with the stench of decay. The Watcher's eye glowed brighter, its gaze intensifying. A deep, resonant voice filled the air, echoing through their minds. "You dare disturb my slumber?" it boomed. "You who are full of sin and lies have come seeking truth, but truth is pain." Emma dropped her camera, clutching her head as visions flooded her mind. She saw herself standing in a darkened room, her hands covered in blood. Victor fell to his knees, praying desperately, his voice drowned out by the screams of those he had wronged. Darrell tried to run, but the ground beneath him split open, and shadowy tendrils reached out, pulling him back. Eleanor, shaking but determined, began reciting an incantation she had found in her research. "If I can complete this ritual," she thought, "I might be able to sever its connection to this place." But the Watcher's voice thundered again. "You cannot undo what has been done. You cannot escape judgment." The shadows rose from the ground, taking form. They became twisted, skeletal figures with glowing eyes, their movements jerky and unnatural. They encircled the group, their whispers turning into mocking laughter. Victor, clutching his crucifix, stood defiantly. "Leave them and take me. I am the sinner," he cried. The Watcher's gaze focused on him. "You seek redemption, but none will be given. Your soul is mine." The shadows engulfed Victor, his screams echoing before fading into silence. Emma tried to flee but was caught by the shadows. Her body convulsed as the life was drained from her, her final moments captured by her fallen camera. Daryl, now a babbling mess, was consumed next, his skepticism shattered in the face of incomprehensible horror. Eleanor, the last remaining, completed the incantation. The crucifix began to glow, and for a moment, the shadows recoiled. The Watcher's eye narrowed, its voice filled with fury. "You cannot banish me. You cannot escape what I am. I am eternal." The crucifix cracked, its light fading. The Watcher's power surged, and Eleanor was lifted into the air. Her vision blurred as her mind was overwhelmed with images of her past, her betrayals, her failures, her regrets. The Watcher's final words echoed in her ears. "You sought the truth, and now you will become part of it." With a blinding flash, Eleanor disappeared, her body reduced to ash. The village fell silent, the whispers fading, but the Watcher remained, its unblinking gaze ever watchful. Ashenmoor remains a cursed place, its secrets buried in ash and shadow. Travelers who venture too close report hearing faint whispers and feeling unseen eyes upon them. Some claim to see the Watcher's eye in the distance, glowing ominously against the night sky. None who enter the village ever return. And so, the Watcher waits, its gaze fixed upon the ruins of Ashenmoor, a reminder that some truths are better left undiscovered.